Cheers, Kampai, Salute, Gambe, Skål, Prost. Hello, and welcome to the Drunken Storytellers podcast, where I tell folk tales and folklore from around the globe. So sit back, grab yourself a drink, and enjoy the show. Hello everyone, hello fellow folklore buddies. Hope you're all well and fine and dandy and whatnot. I'm trying something a little bit different, so please let me know if the mic is a little bit quiet. If anybody is actually watching this at the moment, I don't think they will be, because I've literally just come on. So just bear with me, I'm just going to check a few things. This, in theory, should be coming through. I've moved desks basically, and my mic has been misbehaving, shall we say. So anyway, right. Excuse me. Always takes me a little bit of time to kind of set up and get ready for this bit, and I'm always worried that the sound doesn't come through. It says it's coming through. I'm hoping that whoever's watching this can actually hear me. Yeah, it says sound's coming through. I don't know how loud it is or whatever, but I was having problems with the background fuzz again earlier, so if that does occur, please let me know. Anyway, so, as I say, hello fellow folklore buddies. Hope you're doing well. Welcome to episode 9 of The Drunken Storyteller, Horror in a Suit. I can't actually see my notes. Ooh. A bit of an odd one today. Ooh, sorry about that. Bit of an odd one today, as I say. It does require a bit of a content warning, I feel. So, well, not this bit, but when you get to the... Ooh, am I getting background fuzz? I apologise if there's an echo here. 1 second. No, it's just being really weird. So whoever's watching this, I apologise about these random interruptions. I've got this little sound volume thing that says it's picking up some background fuzz, but it's not. How bizarre. How bizarre. That stupid song, A Brim Full of Asher and whatnot. Anyway, back to it. So yes, distractions. I've not even started yet and it's all going wrong. So, where are we? Yeah, a bit of an odd one today. As I say, it does. I feel it does require a bit of a content warning for the story aspect of this episode. Not the discussion bit that I'm going to be doing now, but the story aspect at the end. There is a story that I have written that has come from, well, a very brief story that I've written that comes from an idea. And has connections to a real life event in the recent past, and some of the details of that event are quite horrible. I won't go into too much detail of the actual event. I'll briefly go over it, but it's all there over the internet, and you'll all know what it is when I start talking about it. So anyway, before I get to that, what am I drinking this evening, or now, as I pour into my glass some more? I couldn't think of really anything or find anything that related to the themes and topics of today's episode. I could have brought something like really expensive and posh because it says suit, but I didn't. So I brought, I'm drinking some Vocation Life and Death IPA. I've also got some Ghost Ship down there that may make an appearance. I suppose Ghost Ship horror, you can kind of connect them there, but it doesn't really connect to the stories or whatnot. So... well, yeah, that was a bit of a cop-out this week, so I do apologise. Anyway, yeah, so cool. It's so weird not having to hold my mic, but I do feel like I need to get really close so you can hear me. Lip-smacking goodness. Ooh. So, before I kind of do the story bit, you know how I generally do a little bit of a discussion about themes and whatnot, and kind of where the story comes from and things, and a bit of background and stuff. So I'm kind of going to do that now, but I'm also kind of not. I'm going to ask a question, and I'm going to answer the question, because it leads into kind of why I do the story, and why some people might find it not folklore, as a bit of a hint. So yeah, I say folklore, myths and legends. You could probably call this a myth or a legend, but I call it folklore. And you'll kind of see where I'm going with that in a minute. So before I go into that whole horror in a suit thing that I'm talking about, I'm going to ask the question, what is folklore? This is something that's kind of been, as I'm delving into folklore and kind of the myths and the stories and folk tales and all those manner of things, you generally see quite a lot of very similar things. And I bet if I ask a lot of people out there who maybe are new to folklore or new to kind of these ideas, and I ask them, it's like, what is folklore and what are folk tales? I reckon most of you will give me the same answer. And that is, they are old stories, usually retold in a spoken word format around a fire or in a pub, or some drunk twat speaking down your lug holes on a podcast, telling you stories of yore. And quite often, especially folk tales, they have a hidden meaning behind them, or a deeper meaning than just being really cool stories. So things like the Kelpies of Scotland, these tales and creatures are, and I will do an episode on these at some point, because they are kind of cool. They're like creatures that basically warn of don't go swimming in lakes because you might drown. But then there are some stories which are just really weird stories, like when I did the dragon episode, you had the Dragon of Wantley. Because I'm not really sure there's a hidden meaning in that, other than don't stab a dragon in its ass, or don't be a dumb drunk knight dressed as a metal hedgehog. So, but generally there is usually some kind of moral, there's either a moral message in there or a message that portrays kind of fear and the human condition, or some kind of allegory within it. And this is kind of the answer that most people will give. And they will generally also say that it's old, as in not recent, the before times. Ooh-ah, back when the days of yore, and you had knights and castles, and I don't know why I've gone funny with me accent, but yeah. So most people probably think Middle Ages and earlier and stuff like that. Kind of, you've got your myths of the Irish and Welsh folklores and stuff. So kind of hitting it back. Excuse me. Hitting it back a couple of years, a couple of centuries ago. Well, I'm sorry to say, but you're wrong. So is what I'm going to say to that. It has nothing at all to do with being old folklore. There are some dictionary definitions that I feel kind of missed the mark a little bit. So one I've got here is from Cambridge Dictionary. It's the first one you kind of comes up when you Google it. But it defines folklore as the traditional stories and culture of a group of people. Kind of right, but I'll go into kind of why I think that's wrong in a minute. Whereas if you look at the wonderful, wonderful world of Wikipedia, and you just Google folklore or what is folklore, and the Wikipedia folklore article, I think fits a little bit better. And that is the expressive body of culture shared by a particular group of people. So the main difference here is the word traditional. The Wikipedia article doesn't use the word traditional. I would maybe say the traditions and stories and culture of a group of people communicated through different forms of communication, or shared through different forms of communication. So in the past, where am I in my notes? I'm probably just kind of rambling here, and I've got notes, and I should probably be following them, otherwise I'll go off topic. But yeah, so a lot of where am I going? I'm kind of completely going sideways here. Talk to folklorists, not me though. I do not agree. Yeah, I know I'm not a folklorist. I'm a tit basically. So yeah, it's about expressing the culture, telling tales, and spreading the traditions of a society. They are not traditional stories. That's one thing I want to kind of get through. So if we think about kind of the what people would consider traditional folklore, like the old tales, things like the Dragon of Wantley, Tamlin, the Mabinogion, Finn McCall, and all these kind of stuff, and the Norse sagas and things like that. These were all spread via word of mouth, but these are, at the times when they were around, they were stories that portrayed the culture of those group of people. They told of the ways that they lived, and they expressed their fears and their desires and all kinds of things within stories, and kind of how they viewed the world. And so that is them expressing their culture, expressing their traditions through a forms of communication. It was done through word of mouth at the time, because most people, obviously, like the people who tell these stories and they build up the folkloric tales, couldn't read or write. The Nordic culture is very much based around telling the tales and speaking the tales. They're not a very literate culture. They don't like to write things down. So anyway, so we see the rise of the storytellers and the folk tales and things being told around a fire or a fire pit or something like that. So if you lived in a mountainous region, you would tell tales and lore about mountain plants for healing, or cave trolls, or frost giants that lived in the top that caused avalanches, and things that related to the land around you. So yeah, you're in a mountain. Oh crap! There's an avalanche coming down on us. What have we done to piss off the frost giants and shit like that? So you get tales coming around of explaining kind of giants pissing off giants, and so giants are throwing snow down at you and stuff. So yeah, the reason that these kind of ideas as well kind of come through, so your giants, your kelpies, and your kappas, and your forest spirits and stuff like that, they come from the idea that we as a species, the human species, we like a good tale. We like a good tale that scares us in a way. Kind of like we respond to a good story as a kid. We'd respond to a good story about something hurting us, rather than our parents saying, "Don't do that because you'll get hurt." So it's a bit boring, isn't it? You can't go swimming in those waters because you'll drown, because there's undercurrents and stuff like that, and it's bad for you, and it's cold, and don't do it, otherwise I'll give you a spanking. Yeah, that's boring, and no kid listens, as proved by human nature. But if you turn around to a kid and go, "You can't go swimming in those waters, there's a creature in there, a half horse, half fish creature that will drag you under. It will entice you with its beautiful singing, and then it will attack you and drag you under the waves, and it will drown you. Or it will kind of, if you go to the river and you mess around, the kappa will jump out. He will sumo wrestle you to the bottom of the river, and then he'll suck your shitty kodama out." And I'm not going to explain that. You'll have to go back to the kappa episode to listen to know what shitty kodama is. So yeah, kids respond to that, and even in adults we kind of respond better to stories that are told us, rather than facts and figures, so to speak. We see this whole rise currently of fake news and things, and it's because the stories behind these fake news articles are so much more engaging than real news. This is why we have, like, the Marvel Universe cinema stuff is bigger money than like documentaries and stuff. So we like a good story. They speak to us on a I suppose a spiritual level, or a kind of a deeper level than "don't do that" or stuff like that. Anyway, so here we going sidetrack. Going back to spreading tales. Spreading tales, yum. So we've got spreading by word of mouth because the yokels couldn't read and write. But then as we kind of move through time and it comes closer to kind of the modern era, we see that more and more people start to read and write, and folklore begins to change as it gets written down. Especially when kind of like the church gets involved, because they like to record things, they like to write things down. So there are a few examples of kind of pre-Christian folk tales, but not many, especially in Europe. A lot of the folk tales in Europe are now heavily Christianized, involved in the church. Some of it does seem quite brute force, but they like to write it down. So we see this change in the way that folklore is told, because it's written down rather than embellished and loved, I suppose, by the people who tell these stories. But yeah, so we start to see that, and then we get the whole thing in the Victorian period, where we get Victorian folklorists hunting down all these tales, compiling them and putting them out there, and again seeing this kind of love of them, but they see them as stories. They don't see them as anything other than that. They don't see them as the cautionary tales or anything like that. But they also like to spread ghost stories around a little bit. So all good Victorians like a good spoopy tale. But again, this is them expressing their culture. They're living in a time of change. People are living in big houses now, and houses make, in the big Victorian cities, they make weird sounds, and you're starting to see the rise of electricity and a change in society, and things in our conscious that are kind of trying to get used to this. So ghosts start to become a bit more, and so we see a change in folklore, and these then start getting written down with people like M.R. James and stuff like that. So you are seeing them expressing tales and stories that relate to their culture. A lot of the Victorian ghost stories are of widowers and rich people who have come to haunt their fortunes and all sorts of stuff like that. But again, it's tales that are expressing the culture of a group of people. So that's the thing that I want to kind of reinforce here. It's stories that are expressing the culture of a group of people, and you'll see where I'm going with this in a minute. So as I say, coming now to modern times, we have very different means of communication to what the Victorians did, and to what the people in the Middle Ages did, and pre-Middle Ages and stuff like that. We have the invention of the radio, then the TV, and then modern internet. These stories then start to change, and we start to see tales being told over the radio. And so rather than being sat in a group of people, one person telling the story, maybe read from a book or something, people sit around a radio and start to listen to it. And then the themes of the story start to change as well. Ghosts, rather than being in the house, there are stories of ghosts in the machine, so to speak, ghosts in the radio, and then ghosts in the TV and things like that. Like the smoking gnu for fans of Terry Pratchett. If anybody gets that reference, well done. But yeah, so we start to see that, and then people, again, they're becoming more and more literate, and they're actually being able to write things down. And something I remember as a child in the 80s, yes, I'm old, this thing of chain letters. You'd receive a letter from a friend or something which has said, if you don't post this letter off to 5 other people, you're cursed for life. And again, it's kind of it becomes part of, in a way, a little bit kind of like folklore, because it's a group of people expressing fears and things about, oh my god, this is cursed, and things like that. There was even a spate kind of in the 80s of, again, this is probably a little bit iffy to talk about, but there was a spate of, and this is completely completely off topic and completely random, but witches recording curses on tapes and then spreading the tapes around and spreading that, things like that, and then that's where you kind of get things like The Ring and stuff like that, cursed videotapes and stuff. But again, it's people communicating their traditions and their societies and expressing their culture in a way that is modern, so, or in a way that allows them to communicate these ideas to the group of people. Obviously, these chain letters then now move in modern times. We still get them now. These bloody stupid chain emails or these chain gifs and messages through Facebook Messenger and stuff like that. If you don't pass on this message, you will be cursed. Or pass on this message, one share equals one prayer to save Jimmy from cancer, or whatever like that. All a load of crap. But again, it speaks to us in a kind of deeper level, because it connects us to people, it connects us to tales, it creates a story, it creates a narrative. So you see things like that, and kind of these things aren't, I suppose they're not really folklore to some extent, but they are folklore. But it's that idea of passing along a tradition, well, not really a tradition, but expressing the culture of the internet being dumb, basically. Yes, you're dumb, let's go thoughts and prayers and crap like that, because apparently thoughts and prayers helps people and money and saving the NHS and not anyway, won't go on a rant just yet. But yeah, so anyway, so we've gone all through that. The other thing that kind of comes through from this is we have the internet, where we have things where we can share and do crap like that. We also get message boards, memes and GIFs, or GIFs, or GIFs, doesn't really matter. I call them GIFs, call them what you like. So folklore, as we've looked at as in passing the stories around and to express the culture of a group of people, I'm going to say this quite a lot, and I have said it quite a lot, and I'm still going to say it quite a lot. What does this have to do with internet message boards and memes? Well, memes and GIFs are a modern form of expressing ourselves. They are the modern internet culture, and roughly 60% of the world in one way is online. So in one way or another, over half the population is online. So it's a global culture. The world is now a global culture online, and so we share things that represent this online culture, and we express the online culture through GIFs and memes. So they kind of become, and this is where I start probably to annoy some people, they become digital folklore. So we have this concept that we are expressing our culture in a means of communication that is modern and allows us to share these ideas and share these stories. So things like Bernie's Mittens, for example. This must have been within about 10 minutes of the I can't remember it, but the Mars rover that just landed on Mars. Within about 10 minutes of the first image from the Mars rover, there was a tweet flying around with Bernie on Mars. So Bernie's mitten, the picture of Bernie, this old man sat there on his chair with his mittens on, looking cold and miserable because Joe Biden won. It's become folklore. He's a folklore creature in a way. And we see it with all sorts of other creatures in kind of your traditional folklore. It's the same idea that appears in different places. And so Bernie's mittens, Bernie with his mittens sat on his chair, he's appearing in all these memes all over the place. The idea of him is spreading. It is a folklore. The other one I love is the dog, which is in the burning house, and GIF. He sat there going, "I'm fine," when he's clearly not. This is folklore. You're expressing this. You're making a statement, going, "The world is burning around me, but I'm fine." Honest, governor. It's expressing culture. A lot of people use that when they feel things are not going well and the world is burning down around them, so they're expressing themselves in the modern forms of communication. So that's kind of where we get this whole thing where we do have modern folklore. Folklore is not something that is purely old. It is something that is modern. And we can see that kind of even more other things that are modern, which kind of take on a bit of a darker side. So we've got the 2016 clown sightings. This is kind of a weird one because the whole thing started as a weird internet thing. People going around going, "Oh, crazy killer clowns are being sighted on beaches and things," and yet nobody had actually seen any. It was just people going around saying this kind of stuff. And then the idea kind of took hold, and it kind of started to spread around the internet through memes and GIFs and messages and posts on Facebook and stuff like this. And then people started dressing as scary clowns and running around and terrorizing people. So we kind of see a weird thing there, that an idea is formed and it's not a real idea, but it's then transferred into a real idea. And you could take some very religious ideas from this. So one thing within Hinduism, I think, this may be wrong, if anybody knows anything more about this, please let me know, but certain things exist because we believe they exist. And this is kind of something that happens within folklore as well. Things happen and occur in folklore because we believe they do. And so here we're seeing someone's made up this story about killer crazy clowns. It starts to spread and becomes people's real fear because, fuck me, clowns are scary. And then, yeah, it becomes a real thing, and people do go around dressing up as killer clowns, and they're actual fucknuts, these people, and they can go off and do one. And this is a really serious one today. I'm not being that unserious. I suppose it needs to be serious because of kind of something I'm going to deal with later, so. But yeah, there's only ever, as far as I'm aware, and I didn't really look at this too much, there's only actually one real killer clown, and that is Pogo the Clown, or John Wayne Gacy. But with films like It, we do have this idea of killer clowns and evil clowns in folklore. So it's kind of something, clowns are they're just weird. They get into people's heads. It's that weird white face, smiley, forced look upon them. Kind of something's hidden behind it. You don't really know. It's just permanently possibly happy or sad. You can't quite tell what it is. And yeah, they're just a bit creepy. Anyway, so there's another kind of thing which I might mention a little bit later on. I might discuss it later on in the story, but there's the idea of kind of things like the Momo WhatsApp message that kind of came around, and you go, oh, if you see this scary face on WhatsApp, you must do this, blah, 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 blah. And it caused this mad internet craze of parents and schools and things having issues with WhatsApp and all sorts of things. And then some clever fool, I wouldn't say fool, I'll actually say some clever person, I kind of like this, they edited the Momo face into a episode of Peppa Pig that aired on YouTube, and this is where it went mental. And you start to see kind of an almost satanic panic level of reaction to this and go, oh my god, Peppa Pig's evil, it is possessed by Satan, and all sorts of weird crap goes on with it. But yeah, no, that is only ever appeared on YouTube. It was not in the real Peppa Pig episode. There are other reasons you shouldn't watch Peppa Pig, and the fact that she's a precocious little brat who always moans and gets what she wants through moaning and doesn't actually treat people very well. So, nah, screw Peppa Pig. Anyway, yeah. So, Momo kind of becomes this urban horror. An urban horror, I suppose you can connect to some extent with folklore. I think urban horror is kind of a modern subgenre of folklore to some extent, but that's my opinion. There are some people who kind of count the two together, but anyway. So yeah, the Momo thing, memes and GIFs are digital folklore. They are modern culture. There are ways that modern culture is expressed, and tales and warnings, messages of hope, sadness, and things like that, and they're transmitted in an easy to understand and more often than not amusing way. Much like some of the folklore tales, the traditional tales, they are kind of amusing, some of them. There's always a slight side of comedy towards them with their message of don't do this because you'll drown, or don't go into the woods because the bears will eat you, or the weird woman in the woods will cook you in an oven because that's what weird women in woods do. But we won't go into the grim tales because there's lots of different reasons behind those. But yeah, so I've talked a lot there about memes and GIFs and modern forms of communication, but I also mentioned message boards. And this I'm kind of keeping separate from the other ones. And it kind of brings me to a type of digital folklore that, again, is another subcategory, so to speak. And probably causes a lot more contention within folklore than the idea of digital folklore. And that is of creepypasta. And creepypasta comes from the kind of derives from a couple of different derivations of other things. So it comes from creepy and copy pasta, where copy pasta basically means a viral copy and paste text, and kind of stems from around 2006 or so, originating on the wonderful, wonderful message board of 4chan. And 4chan has a lot to fucking answer for, that dive of a place. Just as bad as Reddit, if not worse. Probably a lot worse, actually, 4chan. It's a little bit creepy in places. And so, yeah, we have copy and paste, copy pasta, and then we get creepy pasta because creepypasta was coined in 2009, where people started to copy and paste creepy stories across the internet on things like 4chan. And they tended to be horror stories, but framed and worded in a way that makes them seem real. So maybe they're set in a local town where the writer lives, and so the level of detail and the level of kind of description of the fear is just about right and makes people believe that they are real. And so we start to see these start to spread across the internet, and some of these stories then start to take on a life of their own. They go beyond the message boards and they start to spread into modern culture. And we will see that in the second part of the story, or within the story that I'm going to read. But that is enough of me answering the question about what is folklore. I hope I've given you something to think about in that little bit of a spiel there. It's a little bit different to kind of what I usually do, because I didn't really want to delve too deeply into the story that I'm going to tell because of the connections to certain things. I'm going to do some little kind of conversations about where folklore and stuff, why it's folklore and stuff like that. But that's in the story, and that's after that bit. But I hope you did kind of learn a little bit, or hate what I just said and want to kill me because I think there's things like digital folklore and creepypasta is folklore and urban legends are folklore and things like that. But yeah, anyway, if you want to know what the story is and kind of what I'm talking about, I'm sure many of you can kind of work it out with the name Horror in a Suit, and the fact that I've talked about creepypasta. But if you don't, go over to the podcast, find it anywhere on any good podcast place, and you'll be able to listen to it. So anyway, that's it for this episode. I hope you enjoyed it. Please do like and subscribe to the YouTube channel. Follow me on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Rate and leave comments on Apple, and do share it around on the socials, as this is the best way to promote. Also, do let me know what you think. Please give me feedback. No one gives me feedback. I don't know whether I'm doing well or not. Please. You can also find me over on Twitter at TheDrunkenStore1. I'm over on Facebook, The Drunken Storyteller. You can email me at thedrunkenstorytelleruk@gmail.com. Send me suggestions on topics and stories to cover and what to talk about, and send me abuse or send me loving messages. Either is good. Also, you can go check out my other podcast over at Darker Days Radio, where we talk about horror-themed RPGs based in the World of Darkness and Chronicles of Darkness mostly, and some Warhammer RPG stuff. We are still running our Enemy Within campaign over on Gehenna Gaming on Twitch and on YouTube, with more to follow this coming weekend. I'm also, hopefully in April, we are starting the Vesson thing. That is happening. It is happening. I know I've talked about it for a while, but it is happening. So, yeah. Well, the drink has definitely not run dry. My throat has run dry from all this talking. So all that is left for me to say is thank you. goodbye, my friends. Cheers! Kampai! Salute! Gambe! Skål! Prost! Hello, and welcome to the Drunken Storytellers podcast, where I tell folktales and folklore from around the globe. So sit back, grab yourself a drink, and enjoy the show.